To become a writer for an entertainment studio, you need to have a lot of patience, luck, and demonstrated storytelling skills. It's a tough field to get into, and a tough field to make a living on nowadays, but it's all worth it if you've given viewers a tale that'll stick with them. It's a responsibility, and one that children are all too ready to jump in on, and throughout cartoon history, there have been instances where children weren't satisfied just writing fanfiction in notepads or on the internet, and sent their ideas for their favorite shows to the shows, and they somehow end up on TV. It's a rare occurrence, but it's happened, and here's some of the most famous examples. Tiny Toon Adventures was always a show that commanded a personal connection with its audience. That got three young minds from Virginia racing. 13-year-old Renee Carter drew up a story about Buster and Babs going to Hawaii, and along with her friends, Sarah Cleef and Amy Crosby, punched it up and got it sent to the studio. Somehow, it got to the writer's room, they loved it, invited the girls to Warner Brothers to further embellish it, and before you know it, good press for the show. As echoed by the title card, Buster and Babs Go Hawaiian was originally sent in comic form, rather than as a conventional script. It was accidentally clever of these kids to send it through as a comic instead of a script, because studios are much more likely to get fan mail and art than unsolicited scripts and fanfictions. All that funny looking art of Julie Bruin you sent in, the staff got that. They endured that. But if you sent them something that looks like this, they threw it in the bin, no questions. But what's this episode about? It's about Hampton being a medieval hero, until it isn't. Buster and Babs are disappointed that one of their classmates has stolen the show yet again, so they take it up with their mysterious creator, Steven Spielberg. He appears as himself, whereas usually they get Frank Welker to impersonate him.
Well, I just got a script from three hot young writers, 8th graders in fact. It's called Buster and Babs Go Hawaiian.
So needless to say, they're taking this seriously. A lot of fun gags in this first act, and a cool time capsule of what Amblin was working on in 1991. Roger Rabbit was still in the picture, you got Hook, this Cats adaptation they never finished, Ralph the Security Guard before he became a regular on Animaniacs, and dinosaurs coming back for the present day. But I always sense that this is just build up to the main event. Trouble arises before the pair even get on stage. Buster, like the diva he is, objects to any flight scenes, but the writers decide not to scrap theirs.
The plane stays. Now back to work.
Writing tip number 1. Give your main character a weakness. This flight to Hawaii is full of gags, like the plane's monitor screen being Pac-Man, with the worst button layout for the game I could think of, the first class area being live action, the airline food, they got in a joke about airline food. All of this is to say the emphasis is from now on gonna be on the jokes. I mean, most of this is just a bunch of loosely connected vignettes about a Hawaiian vacation, with the one new plot thread being Buster having stolen Bugs' credit card so they can afford things after being robbed. They worked in as many side characters as they could to distract from the jumpy story, they made the story as jumpy as possible to distract from the weird jokes, and they put in as many weird jokes as they could so you aren't questioning why Elmira's selling cars in Hawaii.
Oh, what is with this story? It's like 13-year-olds wrote it.
13-year-olds did write it.
Oh yeah, that explains it.
But don't get attached to anyone. Most of them get caught in a volcanic eruption the size of...
Only Warner Brothers would throw a luau inside a volcano.
Honestly, for me, the episode peaks with the meta-narrative in the beginning and end. The Hawaiian Vacation has fun moments, but isn't structured enough for me to consider it one of my favorites. I'm aware that's part of the joke, they create plot holes for themselves for the fun of it. Maybe if they found something for Calamity Coyote to do, I'd be singing a different tune. As many of us know, the story behind this episode was later immortalized in the Simpsons episode The Front, where Bart and Lisa sent a script to the Itchy and Scratchy studio. But to be clear, it's a reference to the behind-the-scenes story. Bart and Lisa themselves didn't become Tiny Toons, yet, and they certainly weren't going Hawaiian, yet. But when I went back to The Front to get some clips, I noticed this scene was different.
Ren and Stimpy season premiere.
This isn't the actual joke, it looks more like a segue into the next segment of this. Ren and Stimpy was also popular enough to have kids send in fan art, with this particular episode, the cat that laid the golden hairball, also being inspired by a comic a fan sent in. But as far as we know, they weren't invited to the studio to fix it up or anything. Writing tip number 2. Don't let John Kay work with children. Way back in my series review, I named this as one of the low points of the second season, and my opinion hasn't changed, this still blows. It starts with Ren discovering the house is full of Stimpy's hairballs, but before he can do anything about it, sees a news report on TV about how hairballs are incredibly practical and rising in value.
They even cure pink eye!
So when Stimpy gets home, he puts him to work making hairballs in a little factory. This goes on for minutes and minutes and is a majority of the episode, just making hairballs. Did a child think this up or a cat? Production-wise, this episode was made in that transitional period where it started out with Spumco, but got delayed and finished up by Games. And it feels like Games just finished it out of obligation before they had to move on to their own ideas, leaving it flagrantly directionless. It's not devoid of snappy sound and memorable imagery, but it's very sluggish. After Stimpy licks himself, Ren, and their lummox servant clean, they discover his hairball gland is shriveled up and expired, and then the episode ends with them dancing, despite the problem being unfixable. We don't see what these hairballs are used for, we don't know where the business goes from here. Ren's at least apologetic for what he's done, for now, but the episode just seems to be celebrating the fact it went nowhere. Of course, when you have a worn-out hairball gland, it becomes hard to make hairballs. So if you have no hairball gland, it becomes impossible to make hairballs.
Makes sense to me!
This whole journey reminds me of a dinosaur dropping!
Dexters Lab Time. This is one of the most famous episodes of the show. Dexter and Computress get Mandark. Unlike the previous episodes I've covered, this one's story was sent in as an audio recording by a 6-year-old called Tyler Samuel Lee, and from the sound of it,
This episode is about Dexter that doesn't know that his new neighbor is Computress.
it was barely edited. The show's team was so amused by this little adventure that they made it into an episode with its own childlike art style. The story goes as follows, I think. Mandark has a new friend called Computress, who Mandark quickly takes advantage of by destroying his own lab for some reason and getting Computress to clean it. But Computress defects to Dexter's side, and they conspire to pull a prank on Mandark to get back at him. What's hilarious is how some parts are really hard to understand, even when you've got visuals to guide you, because Tyler's narration is just a string of events with no detail or elaboration. But he still manages to think of an exciting climax. Dexter and Computress shrink Mandark's head, but Computress accidentally reverses it and makes it grow so big that it explodes into a million little Mandark heads. This is completely bonkers too, but it's also completely in line for the show. Something else consistent with the show is Dexter's borderline catchphrase of scolding Computress for being stupid.
You are stupid! You are stupid! And don't forget, you are stupid!
But this is only so in line because Tyler basically lifted it from an earlier episode of the show.
You're so stupid! 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 Oh, and let's not forget, you're so stupid!
I mean, this is a fun display of child psychology, how oftentimes they'll just copy what they see in their favorite media. Writing tip number 3. Good artists copy, great artists seal. And as you can see, the shift in art style seals the deal, foregoing the bold and structured look of the series in favor of rough drawings that look as though they were drawn in colored pencil. If Dexter's Lab was a Nintendo series, this episode would be the Wii U entry. And it's really sweet how they put Tyler's mother in the corner sometimes, since she helped him record this masterpiece. So far, this has seen the main trinity of cartoons written by kids: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But this right here is the one people leave out of the conversation: Terry and Chris. A short for Nickelodeon's Oh Yeah cartoons produced by Butch Hartman, but created by a 12-year-old boy by the name of John Reynolds. His mother knew of a friend of Butch's, which is how he was able to pitch his idea to Frederator Studios. All the coolest circumstances came together for John, with it being rewarding that, looking back on this short, it's still pretty decent. This kid Chris has some birthday money that he's chosen to spend on an unusual pet. The owner suggests a cockatiel named Terry who can parrot words so perfectly that its head turns into that of whoever he's copying. Wacky shenanigans ensue after Chris buys it. It slips right into the closest thing Oh Yeah cartoons had to a formula. Average kid just like you, plus a supernatural element. I wouldn't exactly accuse Terry and Chris of being formulaic. In fact, I would say it was somewhat influential on the Fairly OddParents. Hi Timmy! That Butch Hartman look is falling into place now, despite the thick line art coming and going. And the school setting was something Fop would adopt when it launched. This bully here even looks like a proto-Francis. But what's going on here? Well, a pretty standard story for a premise like this. Chris winds up in the principal's office, meets this Australian girl, Angela,
You don't look like the type.
and forms a bond with her, bungles it in front of his friends, but Terry's able to help out when Max the bully gets a date with Angela.
Hey man, what happened to Max?
So, we're on the subway now, huh? Hey, I don't want to go on the subway.
Terry's powers keep the story going, getting Chris into trouble, then out of it, so it's all taking advantage of the premise. Writing tip number 4. Just use a talking bird in all your plot points. There's more places it could go, more to do with this concept, but I'm cool with it being one of the program's many one-offs.
Oh yeah, cartoon.
You'll notice all 4 of my examples today were from the 90s, as modern instances of this are far harder to find. I guess because studios have gotten far stricter about accepting outside material. So this means these were conceived 30 odd years ago, give or take, a whole generation. And the question on your mind is probably, where are they now? One of the writers for Buster and Babs Go Hawaiian, Renee Carter Hall, kept writing and has published a plethora of science fiction and fantasy books. Dexter and Computress Get Mandark maestro, Tyler Samuel Lee, went on to become a tenor singer, which I was not expecting, but good on him. Terry and Chris creator, John Reynolds, is the only one who pursued a career in animation, working on storyboards for DreamWorks, Bento Box, and Netflix shows. Since the fan responsible for the Ren and Stimpy plotline wasn't credited, they might never be identified. Regardless, the Ren and Stimpy episode, while funny at times, would be my least favorite of these. Terry and Chris would be my 3rd favorite, the Tiny Toons episode my 2nd favorite, and the Dexters Lab episode is, without question, without debate, without study, a masterpiece. The animation industry deserves as much respect as it can get. These shows grab us young and inspire us all throughout our lives. And all I can really say about that is, why wasn't Calamity in Hawaii, Renee? Come on, that kid needed a break.
The end.